All right. So let's dive into Tampa, Florida here. Why should you live in Tampa, Florida? Because of its quirks. Tampa has a lot of different quirks and a lot of interesting things about it. And you wouldn't think that from maybe the most, let's say, maybe a mid-sized city in Florida compared to a full-size city. You'd think the bigger city would have way more quirks, but this is just a mid-sized city in Central Florida. But there's so many interesting things here. First off, just going off the complete, just the land here, just the setup essentially. Excuse me. You have the St. Pete area mainly, and then you have Tampa, and they are separated by a bay and connected by a bridge, as you can see here. And it's just really interesting because you have neighboring cities like, for example, Miami and Fort Lauderdale being two major cities, but you very rarely have a city across the water from another city that are both, the major parts of. I don't know if this would necessarily be Pinellas County for both of them, but it might actually be. So, anyways, barring that, we can go ahead and start off with the main area of Tampa. This is the largest metropolitan area in this region and houses the largest amount of people and has the most sprawl, which is to be expected. Um, Lot of high rises here compared to Tampa. If we just went downtown here or if we got an image, well, that is not a great spot. But let's just go ahead and click Tampa here. This has the most amount of high rises and businesses compared to St. Pete, which is a lot more condensed, likely due to its location. It's just more constrained, but this is more of a small city, and I've personally been to both. So generally, you're going to deal with Tampa and Yober being the main area of nightlife here. And here's more of the finance and ever-growing tech district here. But like any Florida city, these areas mainly depend on tourism, and you're mainly going to rely on service jobs here. Cost of living is typical of Florida as well, where it's going to be lower wages and higher cost of living, driven by mostly retirees and immigrants, driving up the costs. So important to have a good income here because it is not housing is definitely going to be above the national average here. If you're looking at for a one bedroom, you're going to be looking at the absolute lowest end. I mean, 1,500, but that's if you get really lucky. You're looking more about 17 to 2,100 for a one bedroom. A decent one anyways in a decent area. So you can get by finding a decent place for 1,500, but it's just unlikely here. Um, Definitely in terms of geography, I guess you would say the area of St. Pete's a lot more dense and walkable if that's your preference. If you're cool with more sprawl and just more activity, just more driving, you can live in Tampa. You have more suburbs and just more spread out because they don't have the land constraints that St. Pete has. Recreation here, like I said, you have Yober City here, which has the greatest amount of nightlife. It's a little like I am just trying to be completely factual here. It's a bit ghetto, but it's completely fine if you don't mind that. But it's definitely really popping over here. And then when you go to St. Pete, you would go to downtown St. Pete here, and there's a strip. There's going to be strips of bars here, generally. If I can find any images. Okay, that's just going to show the water. See if we can find some of the nightlife here. St. Pete bars. Let's see if any of this. Yeah, Central Avenue. So Central Avenue is going to have all your nightlife. Just going up and down here, this area is gonna be popping. It's gonna be the size that a mid-sized city has. You know, it's not gonna be a massive nightlife area with a ton of bars or anything, but it's enough. And this area has a high enough population where it'll be enjoyable. It's not a small town or anything like that. Um, just to add on here, we can look at the major industries here, which we've already talked about. We can look at the neighborhoods, right? So generally, any typical of any Florida cities, closer you are to the coast, the safer it generally is. But most of St. Pete is generally safe. You're not really going to run into any really bad areas here in terms of like violent crime or anything. It's pretty well secured, and there's the laws really in full effect in these areas in most Florida cities. Most of the diversity here will be Caucasian and African American, and you do run into a hurricane risk, which I know that's a little bit of a weird transition, but yeah, besides the demographic, and the storm surge here can cause massive flooding. So definitely a risky area, and this area is very shallow, and it doesn't have a massive cliff, underwater cliff around here, so you're at high risk if a hurricane enters this area. If that's a deal breaker for you, it might be. You just need to keep that in mind. Climate here is going to be the subtropical climate. Hot winters, hot summers, winters that are short and mild, but they definitely get cold, and it is jacket weather. It's not like South Florida where it's perpetually warm. This has a little bit of a summer that's brutal, like the rest of the country. I mean, the rest of the state, but it's going to have a little bit of a cooler winter. But in exchange, the summers aren't as long as South Florida, so it's a good balance overall. Not a massive difference. I mean, it's still going to be a warm winter overall. I mean, it's overall nice weather if you prefer warm to hot. So the Gulf doesn't supply the greatest breezes, and they are fairly warm breezes, but still better than nothing and better than being in inland Florida. So we just need to keep that in mind. Transportation, like the rest of Florida, not great. Don't really have much public transportation here. St. Pete might have a bit, just because of the nature of its density, but in general, you're going to be driving around everywhere. Um, in terms of some quirks here, Clearwater. Clearwater has a very big Scientology population, which is very interesting. Downtown Clearwater is basically owned by the Church of Scientology, which I found super interesting here, and that just adds on to the quirks. Um, it's kind of just in this area. And then another quirk, like I mentioned earlier in the video, is how to drive from city to city, you're going across a bay, which is cool. And the traffic here is very, very bad. Most of the major cities in Florida in general are like that, but this will be very typical where it's only really low traffic in the middle of the night. So you need to keep that in mind. Definitely would recommend living closer to work. Education's there are good schools here, but it definitely would not be above or exceptional. But I heard they have been improving, and they have been kind of paying for people's tuition to work to go to school here. And then you do have the major university, University of Central Florida, which would be in, I don't want to get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's in it's in central Tampa. I mean, yeah, it's in Central Florida. Oh, do I not have that wrong? University. University of South Florida. Right. So they have that in Tampa and in St. Pete, which is the major city in this area. Obviously, being Florida, you're going to deal with, you know, not deal with, but you're going to see a lot of beaches, and beach life here is really big. Outdoor life here is really big. You also have some really, really cool marine wildlife, like you have manatees and Atlantic tarpon that come up close to shore, and you'll be able to see those. I mean, let me see if I can pull up some images here. Manatee in Tampa. I mean, it's awesome. Oh yeah, you go to these electric power plants, and you can just find these just everywhere. There's just a ton. And I was actually here during this time, January 29th, 2024. I was in this area, and it's just, there were just so many manatees. Yeah, it was a chilly winter in Tampa when I went, so they came here for the warm water. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. So generally a very good place to live in my opinion. I mean, my take on it is if you like warmth but you don't want the crazy, you still want a mid-sized city with all the amenities, but you don't want crazy, crazy traffic, and you just don't want to deal with a lot of hustle and bustle. Tampa's a great city. The cost of living is lower than Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, West. I think it's cheaper than West Palm County. It's definitely cheaper than Miami-Dade. So overall, good beach city, coastal city. Going to be expensive, but if you can afford it, you're going to have a fun time. You have a lot of things to do here. I mean, including the St. Pete museums. I mean, yeah, the Dolph Museum, which I personally wouldn't recommend, but from going there, but from people's people's reviews of it, it's a very good museum. It just doesn't have much, but this is one of the biggest attractions here. You also have that power plant with the manatees, like I mentioned, and you have a major stadium. It gets a lot of traffic. Yeah, the Tropicana Field runs MLB. And yeah, typical mid-city amenities, a lot of energy here. There's plenty of people moving here every year. So definitely would have a fun time if you came here. Just bring some, just have a good income, or be a retiree, which a lot of people seem to do. And you will enjoy your time here. So yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. Please let me know if there's anything you want to go over that I didn't go over in this video, and I will see you guys next time. All right.